Oh, yeah. We're live.
What up, folks? I'm just trying to chill and tweet at the same time here. How you doing, Josh? How you doing, Peace?
I'm thriving. I'm thriving today.
Look at this this ominous black square here.
I know.
Who's going to show up in this ominous black square? All right, we're going to kick off here in a second. Give people a few minutes to roll on in, but frankly, this Friday snuck up on me, Josh.
Me too, man. I'm hanging out in El Salvador. I've been in the ocean, been on the beach quite a bit. I can't believe it's Friday, but we're here. We're doing it.
I love it. I love how much of a Bitcoin maxi you are that you just plan your travels around.
I mean, it feels important for me to say that I have been coming here it's Bitcoin adoption. I need to clarify that anytime I tell people I'm coming here. But
it's okay, man. You're a big ordinals guy. I get it. It's an evolving space.
I'll accept it.
Love it.
I mean, the place I'm at's literally called Bitcoin Beach, and that's not a joke. It's branded Bitcoin Beach.
I mean, it is a joke, but it's not a joke. It's a joke. It's not a joke. Yeah.
Yes.
I think we got a spicy show today, or at least potential, depending on which side of the world we woke, or of an issue we've woken up on here today. But stoked to dive into it. Yeah, and there's actually just it feels like just a ton of stuff is happening out there in our world, at least. We got a couple projects launching later today that we're going to tell you about. As you can see from the left-hand side here, we're going to talk about all sorts of things. The Everything app. Well, we got to touch on the Bankless stuff. And I know you've put some crazy stuff in the lightning round, and I think our lovely guest today has done the same thing. So should be fun. How you doing, Peace?
Yeah, Peace, you want to play us in or what?
Yeah, let's just kick it off. Let's do it. After Peace tells us how he's doing in his dry air.
Oh, look at this. Well, the air's dry. I'm doing great. And we've got another who's rolled in. What up? We're about to kick this off. I'm gonna play us in here, and then we'll intro you, Ben.
It's funny. I've talked to Ben so many times, and I think this is the first time I've seen his face.
Honestly, this morning I was like, wait, is Ben going to show up anon, or is he going to show up what's this?
Yes,
I don't think if I saw you walking down the streets, I would not see you. I would not be able to pick you out. So
honestly, it's been super fun to try and brand the squiggle, but I'm not like an anon. I'm totally happy to come hang out. Yeah. It's just you get known for that eventually, right?
It's a quality squiggle.
Appreciate you guys.
We're back for another episode of Internet Explorers, and a very special one today because we have Ben. Ben is our first guest host of this. I think something we'll do much more of. And I know you've been hosting a whole bunch of spaces this week, kind of diving into consumer and a few of the other meaningful topics of the day. And those have been absolutely wonderful. I've tuned into a couple of them. So I'm sure we're going to have a good conversation today.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I'm excited to hang, guys.
Should we do a little Ben intro? I'm assuming 99% of people know who you are, but there may be one person listening to this that doesn't. So do you want to give us kind of
I don't know who Ben is.
All right.
Yeah, totally, guys. I'll give the quick spiel is I've been around crypto land for about 4 years now. Initially kind of came in more on the finance side, kind of background in more of that stuff, international economics, was working in politics in Ottawa. And yeah, it was super random. I listened to an XRP podcast on some finance pod. And I was like, oh yeah, that crypto stuff. Okay. So I don't know, pretty quick made my way to ETH and Bitcoin. And both my parents are kind of small startup people. And ETH just made sense to me as a platform where people were building interesting stuff. So yeah, I did a little DeFi startup. I think that's initially actually how I came across Jess. This thing was called Geyser. A couple friends doing incentives and stuff back around the DeFi summertime period, 2020. And it was interesting. That's the first time I ever learned any of the public facing crypto stuff of just what do you do when a community is when token, all the speculation side, basic community building and all that stuff. and then pretty quick, I shifted over to the arts and culture slice of the scene, which just feels more natural for me. And there's a couple things there, but yeah, did Accelerate Art with a good friend of mine, Claire Silver. So this is an art nonprofit, and we do, I want to say it's about 6 or 7 shows now a year, like just following the art and crypto conference circuit, really. Trying to support some people who are working with blockchains in their, artistic lives, and have worn a few hats since then. At the moment, I'm more wearing the angel investor advisor hat, so I get the chance to work with, it's now about a dozen companies, kind of playing in this intersection of crypto and like culture, right? Gaming and fashion and art, and so that's kind of that's the quick version.
I love it. So for folks that are maybe watching this on Twitter or any of the other channels, we have live chat minting enabled at live.seedclub.xyz. So if you're watching somewhere else, you probably want to hop over there because the chat's popping off here a little bit. Ben, just going to loop you in a little bit because it's like, hello, GM, GM, GM. Oh, Josh's hair looks good. Who the fuck is Ben Roy?
Nice. Thank you.
Excellent.
That was Mac Mahill, though, so you can probably just ignore that. Yeah. Oh, and then 0x Designers in here is already questioning our UX.
Chirping.
Deal 0x. We'll talk more, buddy. All right, Josh, let's jump in, man. We got a big list today, and
let's go.
Doing some sort of Inception live stream right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is interesting.
This is how we do it on the show.
Maybe people don't know that they can change the theme on the top. That's a really lovely little Easter egg. Yeah. And yes, for those people, we know that the block is out of date on the bottom there. We're working with our tech and infrastructure teams to ensure that's updated for next time.
All right, let's get into it. Yeah, Ben, it was funny. We were talking before the show, and Jess, I guess he was listening to the space we did on Wednesday, and he was like, "Oh, what's Siri? Hang on, I got Siri talk."
Happens to the best of us, man.
I got Siri talk to me. He was like, "Oh, there's this one point where I just like so badly wanted to raise my hand and jump in," and we kind of dug in, and it was the real world asset kind of conversation where I was kind of pushing back on, or I was kind of pushing back on, the idea of going after mainstream adoption directly, and I forget her name, but she was kind of talking about how she is excited about real world assets and building stuff for our uncles, and I think that got Jess going. He's like, I so badly wanted to jump in, and I'm like, I got a topic for you. So let's jump into it. I think actually he posted it Friday, but it was post show, so it counts as this week. But just really like this post by Maddie at Z Prime. I think actually a lot of their writing is really good, and I think pretty aligned with how I see the world. But kind of the core idea of this article is really just like him pushing back on the RWA narrative, and saying it's kind of just the shoehorning of old models onto this new technology paradigm. So really, he's like arguing that tokens are just as real as anything in the physical world, but just because of how novel of a form of product it is, culture just at large just hasn't caught up with that yet. So it doesn't feel like it. And he kind of goes on to talk about gold and Coca-Cola and fashion brands, and kind of highlight how those are only real or like seem real because they're kind of these like useful mass illusions that society is coordinating around for storing value, consuming, social signaling, all these things that we're actually seeing like emergent token use cases for. And in an increasingly digital world, tokens are actually generally like way more suitable means to those ends. So basically, their point is, as tokens continue emerging as credibility machines, as sources of provenance and authenticity, and as a platform to like create and organize around memes and brands, culture is going to realign around them. So generally just like, really, and then I think he kind of continued and just said that that's not going to happen by tokenizing treasuries and real estate. It's going to happen for more kind of like bottoms up use cases of tokens. So, very much appreciated this, but curious, I guess, what you guys thought of the piece generally, and also, I guess some takes on the real world asset narrative that's emerging right now.
Yeah, man. Well, Jess, it sounds like you have a take. Why don't you go first?
Oh, I got a take. Yeah, I mean, I think. So I haven't read this piece, and I think just from how you've outlined it makes a ton of sense. I think my issue is just that anything that has such a deep traditional legacy legal structure around it is going to be incredibly hard to meaningfully bring on chain. And I think you can just look at any like the real estate startups or things that have sort of been around that. It's a very obvious thing. And I think to see how, on-chain transactions and sort of an open ledger could be very useful for things like, ownership of a property and for lending and all this sort of stuff. The challenge is there's 100, 200 years of legal precedent there that's sort of embedded in that entire system that you just can't unwind just by putting something on chain. Like if you want to go sell a house in some small town in Arizona, you're probably still physically have to go down to the property records and check those property records out. Like there's just meaningful barriers to that adoption. And so I think it's just going to be like, I have a lot of optimism for real world assets. I think it's definitely going to be a huge unlock once we get there. I just don't think it's now. It's definitely not going to be this season's or this next bull run sort of like main narrative. Maybe it's a narrative, but I don't think it'll actually sort of pan out in that way. So I just think the timeline to real world assets being a thing is just much longer than most people think. And I think, that sort of more bottoms up cultural, these sort of, I think we've had a great conversation with Derek in the past talking about this exact thing. Securities lawyer going, "Oh, this is the most obvious thing." Okay, actually, there's a bunch of barriers to it. So, what are the categories where there aren't these sort of huge, legacy or legal systems that you kind of have to play with? And I think that's why digital art and NFTs are sort of the first thing, and gaming super exciting, and some of these social products are super exciting. And I think those are just going to have a much easier chance at actually resonating, connecting, being useful in the near term than real world assets.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm a big fan of these guys. I think Z Prime puts out some of the best writing, at least on the venture side in crypto. I'm much more bullish, probably both short-term and long-term on digital first stuff, just because, as they kind of lay out, it's more native. It just makes more sense. It's more intuitive. The structures are built for the culture itself. I think we'll probably see some RWA stuff around like normal consumer things like the Pokemon cards that Courtyard is doing, things that aren't regulated, right? That don't really have to worry as much about all the baggage. Because if you look at StockX, like what would really be the difference if that was just tokenized and you don't have to worry so much about the back end? Like I could see something like that working out. But yeah, the treasury thing to me sort of is just bear market cope of like, oh, I want yield on chain because, somehow that makes sense. And of course, there are going to be people who disagree and who are interested in that slice of things. But yeah,
I mean, it makes sense. The new products, I think like Ondo, they allow organizations like us to be able to, not we aren't, but they would actually enable us to go participate in treasuries, which we can't do right now. And so, but again, there's only so many of these sort of on-chain organizations right now, and I think that market needs to grow significantly. But I think just the challenge of like, how do you take something that's represented digitally and actually tie that to something physical in the world? Like that is just actually a very big problem still, whether that's sneakers or that's a deed to a house.
I mean, even with gold today, right? It's like we take this physical thing, we put it online where all of the transaction and meaning and everything happens, and then still have to figure out how to like store it and move it around when people, want to claim it or want to do anything with it. So it just doesn't.
I got a friend who's so like, very much more in sort of, let's say, prepper side of things. That's maybe not quite fair. But he's like, go check out. He had 2 duffel bags in the corner of his house, and I went to pick them up and I couldn't lift them up. I'm like, what the heck is this? Filled with silver.
What?
Like, what do you do with this? Like, what? Like little silver.
What was he doing?
Well, it's sort of it's a hedge, right? It's like, why would you hold gold or you hold silver? It's like, okay, well, at least I have some bearer asset that I can go around and trade if shit hits the fan. So I get it. It's very impractical.
Yeah. No, I think they're. Sorry, go ahead.
Just piece highlighted probably the best line in this entire piece, which was, "I've seen worse products than tokens." I've seen products worse than tokens.
There are a ton of great lines. I think like ultimately, real world assets are like the low hanging real world asset fruit, like Pokemon cards that you brought up, Ben, are probably just like useful to improve public sentiment of crypto, if anything. But and even just to like, to have just really basic, obvious use cases to point to is like maybe helpful for us that are just like so kind of far into this world. But I think like Jess, when we're interviewing projects for the accelerator or talking to teams, like we get so much more excited when like the thing that they're talking about and pitching just looks nothing like anything we've ever seen before. And it's just, they're building from this like first principle perspective of what like a crypto enabled like digital first world needs. And they're building for some small, like very online crypto native audience. And I think that's just like, those are the people that are going to show us the future of this thing. And I think, this stuff may be useful and continue getting carried along, but it's not, it's like the newspaper. It's the newspapers on the internet.
Apparently the chat thinks the true store of value, they're not big fans of silver. The true store of value is the friends we made along the way. So I'll let you know when I can actually sell you guys and finally be up this cycle.
Friend tech, baby. All right, sick. Yeah, let's move on. Let's move on to chat liquidity. So Ben, you dropped this post this week. Thought it was great. Would love kind of your TLDR on it. Also interested if there was something specific that kind of instigated it, or if it was just something that you've kind of been ruminating on for a while, as one does with blog posts, and it kind of finally just like tipped it and you put it out there.
It's more that second category. There was nothing specific, and shout out to you, Josh, for being helpful on the edit side. Definitely a couple ideas I poached from you there. I think at the end of the day, it was just like, so I was going through my Discord and just realizing like 90% of this is dead. Like, what happened here? And a lot of it's just bull market euphoria or different things not really being sticky. And so I just thought, okay, like what would it look like to just gather my thoughts on what works in community land versus what doesn't. And so it's not really meant to be all that super insightful. It's more just to say, here's some gathered experience of like what's worked out in some of the things I've been a part of, how some other things have failed. But really it just comes down to like, how do you get people excited to keep showing up? Whether it's, as a group chat that shares some common interest or a particular business that you're trying to build a community around. Sometimes it's helpful just to zoom out, right? And do some like pattern recognition.
Yeah, totally. I think one question that's like top of mind for me after reading the post, which is generally a big thing that we're talking about and thinking about right now is like the like ephemeral products and experiences and, kind of this like episodic nature of the internet and, our attention, and whether like, how do you build like a durable, sustainable, long-term community? Like, is there like, what do you need to get right for this to last years, or are these just like another thing that, people will spend a couple months in, get value from, and move on to something else?
Got to build cults, man. Got to build cults.
Yeah,
sure.
I think there's a great book called The Culting of Brands that I think looks at brand building through the lens of cult, which I would say cults, but are, interchangeable with community in this context. And I think where we fall down in so many of these places is actually creating that sense of a mutual support. And I think that's the best way of saying it, right? Like, I don't think most NFT communities or crypto communities were actually built around the idea of mutual support. They were built around the idea of, pumping my bags or being around sort of a more speculative game that we're all playing together. And I just don't think you can actually build meaningful communities around that. I think that's been a core part of our thesis for the longest of time. And then, I think it's really hard. And I think even if you look at Seed Club, like we've very purposely took a big step back over the last 6 months from engaging in the broader community building for Seed Club, because our attention was very much needed in going deep with the teams that we're working with, and also the marginal benefit for being public there was very low given the bull market, et cetera. And I think the thing to look at is like, as sentiment comes back, how many of these communities are still around and kicking. And I think we'll look at them like startups in many ways, right? Like the vast majority of them will fail, and a couple of them will be, enduring institutions.
Totally. When I was trying to think through some of this stuff, I was just realizing like the most durable crypto communities seem to be like layer ones. There's just something bigger about that cult formation that happens. Like Ethereum has a very strong community regardless of market sentiment, right? Whereas like your random animal adjective NFT project probably not as much, right? It's just harder to get people to care. It's like, it's less deep. People don't have a vision where they can stack their energy and their effort behind. And so, yeah, it's made me realize like, okay, well, what if you are building a smaller community, or if you're building a company, or any of those more like realistic examples? Not a lot of people are going to go out there and build a layer one. What can you take from those experiences, right? And so some of it is just a little bit of, how do you map over successful stuff, no matter what the size is, to what you're trying to do?
Yeah, totally. I think you kind of need these like big, audacious visions to really like attract people and form community around, right? Like it's harder to attract community around like a SaaS product or something. Like you can, of course, but
right.
You know, I think I'm thinking of like Cabin and like occupying this like network state kind of meme space, right? And there's a lot of like latent energy there, and it's broader than just like, oh, we're building a product to solve some need. It's like this is an ideology, right? There's like a kind of future life that we're kind of exploring and building here, and I think it'll be things like that feel like they'll persist versus the like, you know, there's always going to be a shinier new like product or NFT project.
Yeah. I mean, I also think the other point here is that you don't need to have 10,000 or 1 million people in a community to have that be a valuable community. In fact, I think we're seeing the exact opposite, right? These sort of smaller, very curated groups have a lot more staying power. And it's been funny to watch just sort of that meta emerge even on Twitter. We have like Sriram from A16Z talking about small curated groups / communities are underrated, going to try and create more of these in public. I think is interesting. And yeah, even Alexis Ohanian is saying bullish on online communities where people are willing to pay for membership. So I think those are some of those other things, right? There's this idea of, you know, we look at community in Seed Club, very like the broad community is actually not where the most value is created. And what we found is when we actually chunk people down and give like clear outcomes that we're trying to drive towards, all of a sudden that engagement and the value that everybody gets from those smaller communities becomes incredibly meaningful. And so I think like that's probably what we'll see is actually even these larger communities chunking down into smaller, more effective ones. We got some great chat here too. Cult is the root of culture, big cult guy, and Riley Bean saying cults aren't the only way. Very important to remember. There's never only one way, never. But also I think it's funny to me how much the word cult actually has the connotation that has in people's minds. Because for me, it's not like let's go all drink like Kool-Aid and kill ourselves. That's clearly a cult. But also, you know, looking at like people who hold like Supreme, or I mean, I just saw the video of the rockabillys in Tokyo. These guys that just dress up in full rockabilly gear, you know, the hair slicked back, 1950s. And every Sunday they come together and just dance and show off their clothes, and it's a vibe. Like, yeah, maybe. I mean, that's a cult, man. Like,
let's go.
You know, but it's not in that traditional way. So yeah, I think it's.
Yeah, it's kind of like abstracting it away. Of course, like there's a lot of negative sentiment around like what cults are technically speaking. But I feel like there's cults around sports teams. There's cults around whatever this, you know, music stuff. It's like, how do you get people really actively engaged in something? That's to me kind of more the culty side. Some of it is for sure, you know, my chain's better than your chain or whatever. Like there's a little bit of competition and stuff in there, but you know.
Well, I mean, God, the internet is just so good at this, because it's like without the internet, how could within 6 months, you know, you could join this cult and know everything you need to know about rockabilly and know who the right manufacturers are for these clothes that are being reproduced, and it's like that with anything. It's like never before could you. It took so much work to get into something, right? And that was. I don't know. It's really interesting the way community can form around these specific niches now, and it cheapens it and it makes it. Yeah, exactly. It's like there is an element in which it cheapens it, but also there's the accessibility point, and maybe that churn is okay. Actually,
yeah. I'm getting flashbacks to when you were introducing us to the world of the hardcore dance floor and all like the moves that you have to do, and just incredible. What
did I do? What you're teaching me how to do this something, and I think I nailed it.
The Jack. What was it? Jack Skellington or something?
You actually did a very specific regional dance called the Jack Skellington, which I mean it's so funny. I mean I never post on I never post on forums anymore like I used to, but like in the early 2000s, or like, 2004 to 10 or something, we had like national, regional, and local message boards that everyone was talking around, and we would do that where you would go super wide and you would like niche down, and I don't know, it's all super interesting. Definitely takes ritual. It's like reading your post, ban is just like so spot on to so much of my experience with the internet pre even being aware of my behavior.
Man, high praise. Thanks, dude.
Let's go.
Love it. All right, let's move on to everything apps. So shout out a 0x designer tweet this week. Piece, do you want to pull it up? I think it was something like, that everything apps are inevitable in crypto because of composability. And I guess, have a perspective on this, but I think it's just kind of a really interesting thing to kind of tease out and talk through. So curious what you guys think. Are everything apps inevitable?
Where do everything apps actually exist today?
Asia. WeChat.
Yeah. But is there anything else? I mean, I guess you could argue Facebook is kind of like that, even though it's like 5 apps rolled into one. I know. I guess that's my question around this is like where do we see this sort of useful, behavior, user experience that actually can sort of lead to that type of lock-in? And I guess that's it leaves me sort of uncertain on this one, because composability makes it very easy to bring those things together. But it also makes it easier for people to leave and go to other places. And I think a core part of why an everything app works is because, there's actually a government that's like, yeah, you can use this one, but you can't use anything else. And so I guess my question is like, do we see that happening outside of a totalitarian government telling you what you can use and can't use?
Well, I think like going back to our previous conversation about cults, right? And, crypto like strengthens cults, right? Like the economic and social alignment that tokens bring, I think, are cults on steroids, I think, in many ways. And because of this composability, like it would be, theoretically very easy for, a cult or brand that has a ton of attention and a ton of people who very much care about its success and are owners in its success through tokens, to just like consume use cases of crypto that its members want and need and brand it, right? Like I have like FWB or maybe even like Pool Suite in my head, right? Like if Pool Suite had just like luxury Pool Suite branded like DeFi front ends, like I would probably use those because I would just like feel sick. And if the fees go to Pool Suite instead of like Uniswap, like I don't know, maybe that's kind of the lens to look at it through.
You're in like the exact Venn diagram niche of Pool Suite and DeFi protocols too, which is just hilarious, right? Where you're like, how many people are even going to think about that?
100%.
But yeah, I'm kind of torn about this. Like when I read that tweet, I actually thought more about AI than crypto. Where like if you think about AI improving over the next couple of years, like you have an app on your phone or your laptop, and like the main interface is this AI that you're interacting with, and the back end is just like a bunch of APIs for your travel company and for your grocery app and all this other stuff. That's like pretty composable, right? That's pretty open source. It's just APIs. You don't necessarily need crypto to do that. And so I don't know. We'll see. Like maybe the wallets comment, like maybe wallets end up being kind of this main portal for normal folks who aren't going to go and like connect to every single individual app, and something like Rainbow, comes along and just offers a bunch of different stuff. But yeah, I lean to this more being like a consumer AI comment almost.
I like that. We see this in DeFi, the sort of like moving horizontal once you've owned a market. I think, the big play with Blur and Blast is something very similar. I think one of the interesting things from your talk earlier this week was this idea of like questioning whether Blast is actually going to allow other builders to build and launch on it, or whether they'll just kind of launch with their own products first and then open up access to it. I think it's kind of interesting. In the chat here, question is brand/taste the true mode? And I think that type of like identity and connection actually starts to become much bigger here. And so, but I wouldn't call that an everything app really. Maybe it's, but so that's maybe where I agree with like the everything app is just here's the one way you're going to go, interact with the world. I just don't buy it right now, and tough to see how that comes together. But I think this idea of like building a beachhead that is, differentiated and unique, and then moving horizontally beyond that is something we're seeing and probably makes a ton of sense.
It's funny too, like the everything app is more of a consumer facing comment, but like in finance, you have prime brokerages, which offer like a full stack of services to a business, right? And I think this is back in DeFi summer. I forget who this was. Maybe Dan Elitzer wrote something about how Compound as like a lending protocol and Uniswap as an exchange protocol would end up competing to eventually become like a prime brokerage where you could just go and you do all your finance stuff in a decentralized way, just in this one place in a branded way. And so it's funny, like your comment just about Blur and Blast, like those people or that team is kind of the first one to actually explore that. Turns out that Uniswap and Compound really just sort of niched down on their thing versus going wider. So maybe like in finance terms, you get an everything app, quote unquote, but it's not like, when I think of everything apps, I think of a consumer experience. I don't think of like finance necessarily. So I don't know, there's some distinction there.
Yeah, I mean, I think like convenience is like the killer feature of like all consumer products, right? So if there's a place that you trust and know to go, and suddenly they're serving you in more ways, like you're gonna continue doing that. So I think, yeah, there's not gonna be an everything app. There's going to be many apps doing a lot of things.
Yeah, I also think this whole PWA narrative creates a bunch of challenges for user experience eventually, and I think we're seeing some interesting products launch around that. Like, having 10 different embedded wallets across 10 different apps that aren't really allowing me to kind of be a true engaged user across multiple different apps in a composable way. I have to kind of like bridge or transfer to a different place. This is not actually good user experience at scale. And so there's some interesting opportunity in aggregating that. So yeah, I think it's fascinating. And I think as you sort of look at the nuance of what 0x Designer is saying there, I think it's very aligned with what we're talking about here.
Yeah, totally. Nice. Okay, let's jump to Basepaint. So the founder of Basepaint, and I actually haven't used it or used it much. I've clicked around a little bit. Curious if you guys have the story this week about just the first, I guess the like 2 weeks before launching it, or the weeks that led up to launch, and like the first 100 days of it. And I think it's just a really good example and like kind of playbook of how to bring a consumer crypto product into market. So just kind of wanted to like pull out, I think, a few of like the big themes or things that I think they did really well. And then, maybe just throw it to you guys to riff off of. But I think kind of like the 4 big things that I pulled out from this is, I mean, the first one's amazing. Like they built the entire product in 2 weeks, which I think one is a comment on just like the state of like the tooling and infrastructure of consumer crypto. Like this previously wasn't possible, right? And the fact that a single person, or maybe it was, he had a partner, but 2 people could in 2 weeks build a consumer product that lots of people were using for very little cost, I think is incredible. But then also, important to comment on just like the importance of getting into market really quickly with like a light product that you can very easily and quickly iterate on. It's just so important. And I think they just nailed that. The second one is just how hard they hustled for artists. So artists were kind of like the core supply side of this product. Like they knew that, good artists would create more mints, which would then, earn more money for artists, which would then bring in better artists. And they needed this kind of early critical mass of artists to be there to start off on the right foot. And, they just scoured Discord, scoured Twitter, did kind of like the canonical things that don't scale to just get some amount of them to say yes to and enough of them that the art on day 0 was awesome. So I think that was really important. And then I think probably the most important thing is that they actually just like made artists money by default. So they designed their, the mechanism in a way that 90% of the profits from the open editions that were created every day got distributed back to artists. And, through partnerships and, launched on Base as a part of On-Chain Summer, kind of made sure that there was enough like consumption demand for that amount to be meaningful. And, you contribute day 1, money flows back to you day 2, you're going to go back and continue doing this thing. And I think there was a bunch of kind of, social kind of fun game mechanics as well that kind of compounded there. But, making users money by default is just such a powerful tool. And we've seen that time and time again. So, and then, I think after like 100 days, they've distributed almost 400K to artists, which is amazing. And they've done it with, no Ponzi's, no points, which you love to see. So I think just, a great thing to read for anyone, building a product out there or trying to figure out how to get something to market.
Are you a
PMF.
Basepainter piece or Ben? Have you guys gone deep in that?
I haven't gone super deep. I just think like the one thing I would flag is I haven't seen a lot of the art friends that I have, or even developer friends that I have been really excited about this. And it's just like, usually that's my signal to pay attention. When you get, the fourth DM being like, hey, this is super cool. Or like, I built a bot for this. The fact that people are actually willing to spend time on anything is like super high signal to me. So I haven't actually played around. It's high on my to-do list. This is a good forcing function to go mess around. But I think, yeah, it's just encouraging, right? Like just to see people have some fun using a blockchain. You're like, oh, okay, well, this is great. So yeah.
I mean, I think this is actually a really great example and a big deal, because what they're proving here is an on-chain business model, right? This idea of like, create a reason for transactions to happen and route the flow of value from that to the people who are contributing value to that specific thing. And so whether you look at Friendtech, or you look at Basepaint, or you look at Zora, this idea, or Daylight, this idea of being a part of that transaction flow and earning an affiliate like a referral fee off of it. And I think we haven't seen a lot of the stuff where tokens haven't been the core business model under these networks. And I think this should open up like a whole big design space for entrepreneurs to look at and think like, how can we, I think actually Brian Flynn of Rabbit Hole tweeted a while back this progressive ownership playbook. And it's like find and tweak a business model off chain, move business on chain. So companies earning revenue through on chain cash flow, split revenue with other participants, and then give ownership based on that. And so I think it's a new meta that we're definitely excited about. We're seeing a lot more teams come to us with this as sort of the core business model rather than tokens as the core business model. And I think that's exciting. So, I'm just such a mechanism maxi. I think that the ways that we have to capture and distribute value on chain are still very rudimentary, and anybody who's pushing at an edge here and finding some success at it is something we got to pay close attention to. So shout out Basepaint, super impressive. And also I think it's important to note that this is not a novel idea. Like, this is an idea that has been iterated on, and we've seen in many different ways, and there are other teams working on similar things as well. So the ability to get that to market and take it to market so effectively is just really impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And the art's cool. The fact that hundreds of people are contributing to something that outputs where the output actually looks that good is pretty sweet.
There we go.
They actually did it. I think they had another cool mechanic where I think they were giving, so you have to mint a brush to actually draw, and artists, they're like curating artists that got like a super brush that got, I don't know, like 100 times or whatever, 99 times more strokes than like the one that any random person can buy, which is kind of just like this forcing function for decent art, because like it can't just get drowned out by people wanting to draw dicks or something.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
it's funny because like there aren't too many examples of things that actually work, that where people made money, where people had some fun, that you can explain to people outside of crypto. And I don't know, I think like obviously I'm maybe a little bit more on the art side than some folks in crypto. I feel like a lot of artists are actually really open-minded to this kind of thing, beyond the whole like NFTs are going to kill the environment and that whole season of last cycle. And so when you can point to something like this and say, hey, like, look, people are doing something cool and unique over the internet, and there's like an embedded way to make some money on it and have fun. Just bullish. Like I'm into it.
Yeah, and we're talking earlier about cults, and I think artifacts are a huge part about that. And so you sort of have this like evolving sense and sort of time passing based on images representing that. So it's gonna be very cool to see in 6 months even just what the arc of that has been. It's crazy how actually similar all these things are. Like there's sort of an aesthetic that's emerging here, which is kind of fascinating.
I think they curate like the palette or something every day, so it's not just like guided a bit. But yeah, I mean, like, look at it, it's great, pretty intricate, fun to scroll through.
And pixel artists are brutal. Like, they all share techniques and like make fun of people who do shading wrong, and like, I don't know, the pixel artists go deep. So I bet they're finding people who speak like the same kind of vernacular art style. So it's so awesome.
I love how you were like using that as a plus.
Oh yeah. No, it's a
They're
plus.
vicious.
It's a huge
They're
plus. Yeah. Because it's like, it makes it awesome, you know?
All right, we got to
Yeah.
going through these. We're having too much fun.
Let's
go. Okay.
Beauty.
I mean, this is actually kind of a good transition into the indie era of startups. So I think Bryce from Indie VC, I don't know how to talk last week, a couple weeks ago, but recently this week just shared the presentation that he did, and it's basically just breaking down the state of venture capital, but thought he had a pretty useful, helpful perspective that we're starting to, I think, see emerge in a few different places. And basically his perspective is similar to, I think, what Sam Lesson shared a couple weeks ago, is that we're kind of moving beyond this era of factory farmed unicorns and into this era of kind of indie startups, like independent startups. And basically, like the reason that he laid out for that is, actually, the slides are pretty solid. Like the mega funds of the decade, they've just like structurally required massive outcomes. So I've had kind of no choice but to try to manufacture them. And these outcomes, kind of the music was playing for 10 years, but I think recently it's become pretty clear that those outcomes that they need aren't happening, and this factory line is unraveling. And then I think couple that with just constantly increasing tooling, AI, a general like rejection of the status quo that definitely exists within this kind of founder demographic. And we're just starting to see a lot of founders that are considering like alternative and more favorable paths to bringing their visions to life. So yeah, Bryce thinks we're gonna, it's gonna usher in kind of like this big tidal wave of sustainable, innovative, culture changing companies that are choosing to either build independently or just raise smaller amounts. And yeah, Jess, I know we've talked about this a lot and think crypto is a pretty interesting tool for these types of companies. So just kind of wanted to jump into that.
Yeah, I got thoughts. I mean, I think it's the conversation around mega funds and the returns they can drive, and the conversation around zero interest rates, and the music stopped and there's no chairs to sit on and stuff like that. I think it's important to know it's just very cyclical, and these conversations just keep coming up in moments like this where things are down. And so I think like the wrong thing to take away from these narratives is that the desire to speculate on things is not there anymore, or that there won't be these sort of like huge, very capital intensive businesses that need to go get built, et cetera. Obviously you're looking at the AI investing that's happening right now. But I think we're in this very, if we go back to what starting a startup in the Web 1.0 boom was like you're spending millions of dollars on servers, and then Web 2 comes along and there's all these new tools and cloud hosting, and so you can get up even cheaper. And I think what you're seeing with crypto, I mean, Basepaint's a great example of this, is that you can actually run really fast, really far based on the work that others have done and have enabled with the sort of infrastructure they've created. And I think this idea of needing less money to at least get started is a trend that I think is continuing, and there's enough sort of tech advancements that we should probably assume that's going to continue for some time. I think the question though is like, are these good venture bets, right? Like, so will there be venture style returns, or what do venture style returns look like in these things? So I'm not sure like the game has changed so much. I think it is interesting to see just how powerful that the sort of, so we call it the factory line process, or Sam Lesson calls it the factory VC process, which is really, if we're a pre-seed fund, our job is to go find teams that we can package and market to a seed or a Series A fund, and knowing what they want. And that's kind of been the game. And I think there's questions on whether that is effective or enduring. I think it definitely leads to, especially when you look at how, VCs report returns and performance back to LPs, and, just marking up your book has been the way that you were able to go raise your next fund. And I think that's changed a little bit. People are looking for distributed capital at this point. So yeah, I think it's fair to say there's a big upheaval in venture, but I don't think this idea of like it's just going to completely blow up the system has a whole lot of legs. I think there's just a lot of new niches and new opportunities that have emerged, and that's definitely what we're excited about. I mean, that's core to the thesis we have at Seed Club, that community is powerful, and that we can be in spaces early, and that we can be early money in and be helpful in either path, right? Whether that is needing to find more capital to really go and grow, or if we can just go to market and drive real revenues, that changes the game. very quickly. I think we've seen a bunch of these deals come through. I think we've been very impressed with like how fast teams can go build and how far they can get. And I found myself offering advice quite regularly, saying like, take only what you need right now, and go build the thing, because you're going to be in such a better position. I think so much of this stuff, especially in our system, in our niche, it looks a lot like we should be looking at gaming as like the example of what investing looks like. This idea that like, what early stage valuations, there'll be a bunch of risk around execution, and you're not going to see a whole lot of like real data to back up your investment, but these teams can be profitable very, very quickly. And if they are profitable, the next round isn't getting done at 10, it's getting done at 50. And I think that's super interesting.
Yeah, I think another thing that I'm really excited by within the context of crypto is like the possibility of non-binary outcomes, right? Like the traditional VC math of like 1 in 20, 100,000 X's and the rest go to 0. I think in crypto with tokens and that path to liquidity is kind of this like really interesting world where like, can you just have, what if 10 like 5 to 10x? Like how does that change the types of projects you can support and the types of bets you can make?
I don't know if it changes that much. I mean, it changed. You have to kind of be very thoughtful about valuations and that, right? So if you look at media or you look at gaming, but media is maybe another good example, right? Like early stage media deals are very aggressive if you think compared to sort of SaaS or other products, right? Like these investors need to take a very meaningful piece of these companies because so few of them actually work out at scale. And so actually what most successful investors do is let them, look at Barstool or MeatEater from the Chernin group, right? They're finding ones that have success and then adding capital and coming in and buying, they bought 50% of Barstool for $20 million and were able to, turn that into $500 million, right? And yeah, exactly. So yeah, definitely fascinating to watch. And I think I'm just, why I love crypto is it just creates far more paths for us to go and hopefully build something that can be enduring, even though it's a graveyard of things that are not enduring. I just look at the top 10 tokens and be like, well, like, we got to rush through these guys. I don't want to rush. So let's keep hopping.
Let's keep hopping. Let's hop over to Bankless. Yeah, so BanklessDAO, Bankless HQ have been receiving some heat, I guess, over the last couple of weeks for a grant application they made to Arbitrum. Don't actually know too much about this specific application, but apparently it wasn't great. It was an onboarding campaign for I think $1.8 million that received a ton of criticism. And I think what's ultimately interesting here is that much of that criticism was directed at Ryan and David, the founders of Bankless, who are very much sitting in this kind of Bankless HQ, equity entity company world, who are uninvolved in this actual application, but because of their association, they launched BanklessDAO. They were receiving a ton of the slack for it, and they ultimately aren't happy about that. They don't think they deserve it, so they've recently kind of put this statement out that they have plans to separate the brands and burn their bank as a way to make it very clear that this DAO, this Bankless DAO entity, in no way should benefit from the association with this amazing prestigious thing that they have apparently started. So I don't know. This is like, yeah, just go off, Jess. Go off.
No, I can't go off. I mean, what the fuck was the point then? Like, why do it? I guess is my core question. I had that thought the second when they did it and sort of the structure they put out. It just seemed kind of like there was the way that works is if there is a tight alignment, and this idea of trying to sort of separate those things out and put a huge barrier between them. I mean, obviously people didn't see that as a real thing. And I think it's kind of crazy to think that they would see that the differentiation truly. So I think, I don't know if these guys are just masterful at jumping into the troll conversations because they probably just grew their audience massively from it. So kudos to it. But I don't know, man. It's just not a good look, and it's not even talking about the proposal or anything like that. I think whatever. People trying to drain the DAO, the treasury and stuff like that. They're just a bunch of ridiculous comments on it. I think the reality is the proposal I think if I received a proposal like that of asking for money, I wouldn't even look at it, right? Like there's just not deliverable. It was just not a great proposal that was going to get closed. And that's the risk of running these sort of DAOs. Like you end up with a permissionless, anybody can come in, can be a part of it. Like it's very hard to control the sort of the quality of it. And I think that proposal could be really great, and there could be real value under there. And they do great work. There's real human beings with a ton of passion, really pushing that forward on a regular basis. But the outcomes haven't been demonstrated yet, really, or they definitely weren't in that proposal. So,
well, I think it feels like the thing that the DAO has always missed is the leadership, right? Like the way that this could have been successful is, you create this community shelling point for your brand, which is great, right? There's a lot of value in that, but you need to be very involved as the founders of this thing, right? You can't just like put it out there and expect this mass of humans who largely are like being onboarded into crypto through this organization to like just magically kind of self-organize and figure out how to make progress towards something, right? And like, Jess, imagine if like you started Seed Club and then we're just like, okay, sick. Like,
I think that's what the prevailing attitude around. I mean, when this launched, it wasn't like an outrageous thing to think, but I think time shows that that's maybe not the best way to build something, especially trying to find product market fit, etc. I mean, I think what I really wanted to see when the BanklessDAO launched was like a close partnership and collaboration. Imagine the media network that could be built with Bankless. And I saw early stages of that, and clearly they're doing some work on it. But I don't know. I just say it's not a good look. And that for there is going to be some amazing thing built between a media network and a DAO in some way, or maybe some aspects of that DAO. Definitely something I'm excited about. And I think that was the big opportunity for Bankless. They didn't go for that even from day one. And so I guess this is where we are. But I guess, to our earlier question, like around communities and cults, there's activity there. That's an active group. People are building stuff, and it's not because they're getting paid immense amounts of money to go do it, right? The reality is, a lot of these were token incentives and just passion that people were putting forward. And also, I think the vast majority of crypto Twitter has zero clue what things cost. Zero clue. Like, it's just so outrageous that people who've never built anything ever, or even sat in a decision like that ever, or you can have an opinion, but you're going to go attack people for that? Like, give me a break. It's absurd, and I don't think anybody looks good coming out of this, frankly.
That was going to be my only thing to add. It just feels like a missed opportunity on like multiple fronts. Obviously, there's good people involved, and no hate on the actual DAO people, and they contribute on lots of fronts, and I get that. But it's just like, the Bankless guys had a good opportunity to do like some interesting media network. It's more like the ugly stepchild thing that they didn't really want to be affiliated with. And then now, instead of doubling down and like kind of backing your people and approaching this in a bit more of a mature way, you're like, all right, we're just gonna like not be part of this really and protect the nest egg. And so I don't know. I mean, like they do a lot of good work, but on both fronts, like the media guys, like I've listened to that podcast since like 2019 or whatever. The BanklessDAO people, they do a lot of all that translation work, and I there's a net positive here. It's just, it seems like the management of that, like the optics of that, like Jess has already said, no one comes out on top. It's just sort of like a credibility thing where you're like, really? So
yeah.
I love just piece highlighting all of the points of your piece while we're talking about this. It's perfect. Stagnation, bloat, betrayal. Let's go.
All
right, so Ben.
I wouldn't be stoked. I just wouldn't be stoked to be in the DAO and be like all hyped on Bankless, and they're like, "Oh, by the way, you should change your name." Like, that's
what?
pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway,
moving on.
Moving on. All right, Ben, talk to us about Cambria.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a company I've been involved in. I'm like a very small angel investor. It's just a friend of mine who's building a game. They just recently launched, kind of to your ephemeral apps, like episodic nature of products and experiences point. Like they basically just launched a mini game on Base in advance of dropping like a bigger RPG next year. And it's just been interesting to watch that basically without any marketing, a lot of people have jumped in on that and started to play. And to some degree, it's just an intersection of like gaming people and crypto people, right? There's just a natural affinity for, hey, any effort at all was put behind this game. I'm going to try that out and like, let's go mess around. And it's just been funny because, you know, you chat with all these social people or metaverse people or people who are trying to solve for like, how do I get people to care about my thing and show up in it? And here we are in this game and there's like 100 people hanging out, right? Something that a lot of very, very early stage like product folks would be very excited to see if you know 100 actual humans were showing up to use their thing. And so yeah, I mean it's just interesting. Like I pulled on that tweet that Dee's had, which is like, I'm yeeting my friend tech keys so I can go gamble on Cambria. And I just thought it was funny because I think a couple people I know did the same thing. Just you need money on base to go tinker. And yeah, it's just interesting to see like when you give people a reason to gather, like and games do that, right? There's gaming loops that, you know, draw people in. Maybe that's like one of these core social experiences that crypto has been trying to build the whole time, right? And yeah, I mean it's early, like it's like a throwback nostalgia game. I think there's a lot of stuff, a lot of directions we could go with this. I know we don't have a huge amount of time, but just interesting to see people gather around something crypto.
I mean, I feel like we need to play this with our Test Flight Club crew. So Ben, if you could help make that happen.
I'm keen. Happy to come battle.
That's a good opportunity for us to mention our first sponsor, which is Test Flight Club. If you're interested in being an early adopter, tester of new and exciting crypto projects, we've got a curated group of just about 100 people who will use the thing and give feedback. So you can get meaningful feedback rather than just airdrop farmers that are chasing you. So if you're building something new and you're listening, we want to hear from you. And if you want to be a part of that, you can find us on the internet. We should do commercials for our own stuff. That'd
big cosign.
Like, let's go.
Yeah. You should do commercials for a lot of things, I think.
Let's do it. This is my mic. All right. We got 2 minutes left. We're going to hit a lightning round.
Yeah, Peace, fly us through some tweets.
Let's try it out. Okay, awesome.
This piece of setting this up, it's a reminder that all these episodes are mintable on Pods. Our dear friends at Pods have enabled that for us, so you can find that. We can send another notification live, but they're all mintable. We'll update it with the actual podcast after the fact, so you can mint this episode right now. We got a leaderboard. We'll do some fun stuff with that eventually, so give it a shot.
Yeah, nice. I thought this was cool. Basically, Arc, which I think a lot of us are using now, instead of sending search queries like native search queries into Google, they just natively send it into ChatGPT now, which I don't know, I just hadn't really like considered, but is very cool. So like when you can see it in the video, but when you just search something within the like search, the Arc search, it opens up a ChatGPT window and answers your question, which is pretty sweet.
Interesting.
Good.
I tend to use Perplexity. Like Perplexity just feels like it's replaced Google for me. Interesting that they're choosing to use ChatGPT. I think Perplexity is just interesting because it really does sourcing well, where you're like, I have sinus pain, like what's going on? And then, you get a whole bunch of articles that help explain what might be going on. And it's not just the medical side. It's just, they do a very good job at crawling the internet. I'm not just like a medical LARP. Don't worry.
Pete, where can I buy what piece? What did you just search for?
Harry Potter Obama Sonic 10 Inu. It's the people's Bitcoin. Super signed Bitcoin.
Someone was joking about like Thanksgiving being like, so you know Harry Potter, right? And you remember Obama. Well, there's that Sonic guy.
It can't fail.
All right, give me one more piece.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's see.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah. This
is a good one.
We could have done a whole like segment on this one.
Oh my god.
For sure.
Yeah. I mean, this is just one to watch for sure. What is the? I have so many questions. I have so many questions about what's going on here.
I mean, it's like the first time a hacker is actually trying to take over like control of a company and like equity-based organization behind the protocol that they hacked, which seems like a big.
This is going to be a great soap opera. We don't have time to get into it. Maybe we can cover it in a future episode. I'm sure there will be advancements there. I just really want to know how this.
I mean, that's perfect right there. Yeah.
Kind of thinks that we're. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. All right. Ben, appreciate you hanging out with us. You've been a wonderful first guest. Our chat is very active
Thanks
today.
so much, guys.
Deep love for everybody who's hanging out with us today. A reminder, you can mint this episode. You can mint all the past episodes. A lot of fun. Shout out to the pods team. We got Nonlinear, 0x is in here today. Javi again. Always fun to have you here with us. And Stefan as well. We just got a great crew that keeps showing up here. So every Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, we're going to hang out here. We're going to bring the latest of whatever's happened on the internet that week, along with some other smart people who can introduce us to fun new things like Ben has today. So thanks again, Ben. Thanks for everybody listening.
I think last thing, song camp, song camp event.
Peace, how do you let that happen, man?
There's a million things happening right now. So anyway, go ahead, Josh. Give us the plug.
Chill.
I mean, you're the show guy for this.
We're doing a show today at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific at app.song.camp. We've got a 5-song EP that's coming out, streaming everywhere. And we have a new collectible experience if you're into tokens and generative art and music. Bunch of cool songs. Yeah. Super stoked.
Yeah, it's the culmination of, I think, their 4th camp. Song camp doesn't do camps very often. The outputs are always sick and the events are awesome. So you got to go if you have nothing to do. And I think maybe the last thing is a lot of you, I think, are going to Art Basel next week. A ton of our projects, I think Boys Club, Refraction, Pool Suite are all hosting events. I think Cheryl broke it down in our newsletter this week. So check that out if you're going. I think, again, if you need in, I think
Alpha newsletter. This newsletter is alpha. I co-sign. Everyone should subscribe to this C Club newsletter.
Let's go, Ben. That's why we brought you on here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome, guys.
So, I mean, and also Songcamp is just one of those communities that has just been going strong, deep in their Discord. And I'm very, very excited to see this generative CD minting experience that's going to be launched. So at 4 p.m. Eastern time today, it's going to be a live stream like this, I think on Pleaser House, our dear friends over there. So hope to see you there.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thank you.